Okay, let's continue. Sorry for not making such a dramatic entrance as Evie did. I'm so sorry for that. I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to match her. She did it quite all right, and she did it good. My name is Kalle Larsson. I'm editor of a Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, Finnish, European Union website that is called Flyktningbloggen. That gathers about some 35-40 different writers from different countries across the European Union, and also most of us are from Sweden or Norway actually. Some of the ones that has been here before talking are also writers on Flyktningbloggen. So please look that website up, and at least once or twice a week we have also articles in English. So for you English-speaking people, that would also be a good idea to check out the website. I am also previously Member of Parliament in Sweden. I was Member of Parliament for 12 years. Spokesman on refugee policies for all that time, from 1998 to 2010. And I chose last elections a year and a half ago not to run for Parliament again. I think that people should not be parliamentarians for their entire lives. That's just not a good thing. So I wanted to give space for some other people of my party, the Left Party. That would be, it's always difficult to compare parties between countries, but the closest would be Socialist Left Party, Socialistisk Venstreparti in Norway. But some people who are members of Rødt here would also be members of our party in Sweden. But some members are less. That's the way it is, isn't it? Okay, so I will do what I can to show you a few examples of activism and resistance against the refugee policies in Sweden. For more of a full-length version of the resistance, but also the policies of the European Union refugee policy and Swedish refugee policy, please look this book up. I've put a few copies on the table, and if anyone wants an individual copy, just tell me and you can buy it from me. It's called Materialisten. It's a Norwegian book, so to speak, and I'm writing a longer article there about Swedish refugee policy and also about European Union policies on refugees. I will not give you so much on this. I will not show so much there. I will do it once or twice to at least show you some examples of this resistance in Sweden. But I will also I have my words on this, so that's why I'm not using that one all the time. I know that some of you are sometimes looking to Sweden as an example. Let's look, Sweden, they do have a better policy than Norway. And that's okay. Please continue to do that. I understand the need to do that, because you need to show that it is possible to have a more humane refugee policy than what is going on in this country. And in many ways, Swedish policies, despite the fact that we are actually run by a right-wing government, Swedish policies are better than Norwegian policies. I've been living in Norway myself. I don't live here now, but I lived before about 8-10 months in Norway, and I was actually quite shocked about the policies and the debate that is taking place here. It's different. It's very different from the debate and the policies that we have in Sweden. That being said, it's not like Sweden is paradise for asylum seekers or anyone else for that matter. It's quite the other way around in some cases. What we have seen is that also Sweden, and that is the starting point for me, I will give you a short description of Swedish refugee policies, then I will say some words about the resistance, asylum organizations and political parties and so on, and after that I will also try and describe then the different kind of actions and positive examples that we have done in Sweden. So when it comes to refugee policy in Sweden, one has to understand that most of it, or a lot of it, is under the influence of the European Union policies on refugees. Nowadays, it's organized in a way that if the EU decides that one rule or regulation should be put in place in the different member countries, we are obliged. It's mandatory for us to also implement that directive into Swedish legislation. We cannot say no if the EU says this you have to do. Previously, when it came to refugee policies, we could form our own policies, but that is in the history now. We need to follow the guidelines and directives and regulations of the European Union. And the problem with those regulations is that they are most of the time based upon what the toughest countries can agree on. And that is a problem because what we see is that there is absolutely or almost nothing positive coming from the European Union when it comes to refugees. Almost everything that comes from the regulations in the European Union is negative. It's lowering standards in at least Sweden and some of the other member countries. So the problem will be that we will all the time struggle against both the EU and their policies, but also against the Swedish government and the Swedish laws and regulations that is put in place by them. So what happens is that Sweden is systematically breaking international conventions. When it comes to, for example, the right to asylum, the Refugee Convention from 1951, Sweden is systematically breaking it by deporting people to war zones, by deporting them to persecution, and also by deporting actually people to torture. That is one of the very strange things people sometimes think with Sweden, that we actually have the world record when it comes to evictions in the UN Committee Against Torture. Sweden has been evicted 19 times in this committee. That is the most in the whole world. And telling that to ordinary people in Sweden, they just don't believe it's true. And to a Norwegian audience like you, maybe it sounds a bit strange, because you're used to that Sweden has a better policy than Norway, but on this case, no. Sweden also deports people, and the most people in the world, to torture. Then again, when it comes to, if you compare Norway and Sweden, I cannot go into detail on that, but there are some differences. At least a few of them are noted when it comes to how can you form resistance against the asylum policies that is put in place. For example, it is illegal to hide a refugee in your own home in Norway, as Evie was saying before. That's legal in Sweden. You cannot tell anyone that is illegal. So that opens a possibility for us to have open networks where people can go to websites and look, I need to hide, how do I do that? You can contact these and these and these people, and they will try and help you. So that's easier. It's also more information is available for the lawyers of refugees when it comes to deportations, for example. Not always, but almost always, the lawyers will get the date and the time of a person being deported. That is helpful, because if you know when a person is being deported, with which flight, at which airport, it's also possible for you to work directly against that deportation, of course. If you don't know that, you don't have the possibility of going to the airport and trying to stop the deportation. So a few of the regulations and laws that are present in the different countries are in fact helping a lot when it comes to forming the resistance against the asylum policies of Sweden. So I was saying that what you have in Norway is a red-green government, so they call themselves at least, and they are forming policies that are tougher than the ones we have in Sweden. In Sweden we have a right-wing government consistent of 4 right-wing parties or center-right parties, and they are forming the government, a minority government. They need support from one more party to have a majority in parliament. And when it comes to refugee policies, they have found that support in the Green Party. In Sweden we have a Green Party. I know there's one in Norway too, but a very small one. In Sweden the Green Party would have 8–10% perhaps from time to time, sometimes 6, sometimes 11. And they have now formed an agreement with the right-wing government on the issues of migration and refugees. So they are supporting the right-wing government, and they would say themselves that they do it because it helps, and we are shifting, we are moving in the right direction. We, from activist circles and also from left-wing side where I'm from, would say that they have sold out most of their own positions from before in order to be part of the governing circle rather than opposition. But that is under debate, of course. It's not easy to say what is the right thing to do. It depends a little bit on the outcome. But so far, since the elections a year and a half ago, not one single positive thing has come to Parliament. No legislations, no regulations, nothing that is positive has come to Parliament from the right-wing government or then from this agreement between the right-wing government and the Green Party. That is a fact. And we have this racist party called Sverigedemokraterna, the Sweden Democrats. They would be not as FRP, but rather with a different background than FRP. They would have their roots in the racist and Nazi environments in Sweden, and not in the right-wing populist way that FRP is coming from. But that doesn't really say so much. They are, in our context, they are a racist party that no one is cooperating with. They do not influence any policies at all. They sometimes vote for the right-wing government proposals. 9 times out of 10 they would vote for the right-wing government proposals, but 1 out of 10 they would vote for red-green proposals. And if they do, that would then form majority. So it happens that the government is voted down in different issues, but never when it comes to refugee policy, of course, because then they would definitely want to go much further than the right-wing government dares to go. We have also an asylum movement. It's basically about the same structure that the Norwegian asylum organizations are. We have churches trying to help and also doing what they can from time to time to help people hide and to take part in public campaigns and these things. We have the established movements like the Red Cross and Save the Children and all these, Amnesty and the others. From time to time doing very effective work, trying to help, but very much part of the establishment and very also tied up to the fact that they are getting their funding from the state or from other supranational state structures. But we also have networks of activists around the country trying to change the policies. More temporary than long-term working, but they would be like Aktion mot deportation, action against deportation. No one is illegal, as the international organization is called. And I will come back to that, but also paperless people are organized themselves in their own organization. And we have also managed, and I will also return to that, we have managed to convince unions to work actively with paperless people and with sometimes also asylum seekers, and that's a big advantage from what has been the fact before. So what is done then? I will show a YouTube video that is not my own. It's some high school students, I think, that has done it. But it gives you, unfortunately, it gives you in Swedish. but still at least it gives you something to see parts of what is being done. I don't think we'll play the full one, and we will check if there is sound, if I raise the sound there. I will give you a brief summary in English afterwards.
Man utvisar folk som flyr från länder för att de är politiska flyktingar, för att de är hotade av dödsstraff, för att de har stått i opposition mot regimen. Man utvisar homosexuella till Irak trots att man vet att det finns statsfinansierade miliser där som förföljer just homosexuella. Man utvisar kvinnoaktivister till muslimska länder där man vet att de är hotade. Man utvisar flyktingar till länder i krig trots att man vet att de riskerar att dö där. För den första massdeportationen till Irak som ägde rum från Göteborg i januari, samma dag som den verkställdes så dog det 40 personer i en bilbomb i Bagdad. Och Sverige säger att det inte pågår krig i Irak. Så att alltså, det värsta med flyktingpolitiken är den inhumana synen som det speglar. Att faktumet att man sorterar in människor i fack av vilka behöver vi, vilka behöver vi inte.
Jag heter Suleiman, jag kommer från Syrien, 17, fyllde snart 18.
Vad har det året i Sverige betytt för dig och din framtid?
Alltså, jag utvecklas som människa, så nu går jag i skolan som ha kompisar, så det är ett annat liv än vad det var i Syrien. Här känner man sig trygg. Där fanns det ingen skola man kunde gå så.
Hur känns det att du måste lämna Sverige?
Det känns jobbigt eftersom nu har jag gått i skolan, så jag har haft kompisar mot det så länge, så måste jag lämna och börja från början.
Har du någon kontakt med dina föräldrar eller släkt?
Nej, inte längre med mina föräldrar.
Varför inte då?
Jag vet inte, de bodde här innan också med oss, så de åkte iväg, så fick jag och bror stanna här själva. Efter det har vi inte haft kontakt längre.
Varför var du tvungen att åka?
För jag tror de ville vara bästa, eftersom när de lämnade så kunde vi stanna här i Sverige. Hade de varit där så skulle vi bli utvisade hela familjen. Därför var de tvungna att åka iväg för våran skull.
Sometimes the net goes down. This might be such time. Okay, let's just not use any more of the time trying to fix this. Let's continue talking instead. What you saw in this short video was a few examples of how people work in the refugee movement in Sweden. Not that much, but a little. And maybe some of you saw the statistics there, very, very short, but at least about 30,000 people they came to Sweden to seek asylum, and about half of them were allowed to stay. That's not so bad if you compare to other countries. I think that the statistic would say less in Norway, for example. Definitely less in Danish. Maybe 40% in Norway, and about 20%, I would say, in Denmark, for example. But still, that still means that half are sent away. And I'm not talking about open borders here. That would be a dream for every one of us, I think, to accomplish. But I think that's quite far in the future, to be honest. But we know that people are sending refugees back to, as I said, torture and persecution. And some of them who were sent back actually are people that we know afterwards have been forced to flee again, either within their own country or to another country. Some have fled back to Sweden once more. We have examples of people coming for the 5th time to Sweden to try for the 5th time to convince the authorities that they are actually refugees and that they cannot go back. We have Palestinians, we have Ethiopians, we have Afghans, we have people from Iran and Iraq, we have people from Latin American countries and other parts of it. We have people from Bangladesh, for example. Let me just give you one short example of that. How a woman from Bangladesh was treated by the Swedish authorities. She was the wife of someone who was politically important, so she was captured by the Bangladesh police department, and she was raped in prison several times by, I think it was 7 men, and she fled, and she ended up in Sweden. And the Swedish authorities told her that no, you cannot get asylum here, because rape, that's a crime in your country. So what we would suggest is that you go back to your country and report to the police that you have been raped by the police. And that is just an example. We have so many of these stories, and some of them are exaggerating, but most of them are not exaggerating. It's very, very difficult for some people to tell what they have been through. So it's more often so that they do not tell what they have been, what has happened to them than the other way around. So I will give you 3 examples of things that are taking place or has taken place in Sweden in the last years. One is quite new, and that is direct action against deportations. That is what we saw a few examples of here. Most of the time they would deport people during the night. They would do it at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock at night or something like that, just to get people out of the country as smoothly as possible. But as I said, lawyers do get some information, sometimes at least, on when someone is being deported. And 1 out of 2 things sometimes take place. Either we try to go to the airports and physically stop, either at the airport or at the place where they keep the refugees. You could call it kind of a prison. We could go there to prevent them from taking the refugees out of that place. Just sitting down, doing a blockade on the entrance or the exit then. Some 20, 50, 100, 150 people would come, and we would sit down and try to stop the deportation, stop the police vehicles. That would either be done, as I said, at the prison, so to speak, or at the airport, preventing them from entering the airport area. That's more difficult, as airport areas are so big, so it's more difficult to stop them there, but it happens too. And that has actually saved quite a few refugees. I don't have the exact number on this, but at least 10 times people have been stopped from being deported in that way. That is illegal, the state would say. We would consider it some kind of civil disobedience, where we are trying to help people from being deported to dictatorship or persecution or even torture, which has, as I said, happened lots of times. So that is one example. Another is that we would go to the airport and we would try to convince passengers of the flight that the refugees are being deported on to help us stop the deportations. They could do that by saying to the personnel in the cabin, we will not go on this flight. We will not sit down, for example, as long as this person is on this flight, because we believe that he or she shouldn't be deported from Sweden. Sometimes we even pay tickets for people to get in the airplane and to do these kinds of actions. That's not illegal, actually. That's a grey area. What are you allowed to do and what are you not allowed to do? But sometimes also the personnel from the airport, from the companies, from the flight companies, they would understand very well what we were trying to do. And the least disturbance, you know, this is terrorist times, the least disturbance inside an airplane they would consider very dramatic, and they would then stop deportations in that way. We have had 12 actions on Arlanda, the main airport in Stockholm, the last year. 8 of these has been successful. And those people, I don't know if it's 8 or 7 of them who has actually also got their permanent residency after that. And that is an example that these things that we do just doesn't help at that time. That's one thing. We stop the deportation there and then. But we also, of course, do combine with this juridical and political and opinion building and all these kinds of things. So we help the refugees to also get their permit to stay in Sweden. And a person who is supposed to be deported, who is stopped from that deportation, and then gets a permanent residency, that proves to us that this person shouldn't be deported on the first hand, right? Because just the stop of the deportation doesn't give him or her any more arguments for staying. So that shows to us that we are doing something that is very valuable. That is one thing that I would mention to you. That's the most clear example of this civil disobedience that is there. I mean, we would also have networks trying to, helping people to hide. I have had refugees hiding in my home for a few times, and lots of others are helping refugees. We would have the same kind of healthcare system that is present in Norway too. We have healthcare stations in at least Malmö, Gothenburg and Stockholm, and networks helping these people, both with the healthcare issues that they have, but also with help, juridical help to appeal their cases, for example. But I will mention 2 more things that has been successful, and I did mention before that there has been an organizing of people without papers themselves. Paperless people have created their own organizations. And I'm not now talking about Palestinians organizing Palestinians. That's good. That is needed. Ethiopians organizing themselves, or people from Afghanistan organizing themselves. That's also good. It's needed. But we have formed organizations, or they have formed themselves, an organization called People Without Papers Stockholm. Paperless People Stockholm, Papperslösa Stockholm. That has been present for the last 6 or 7 years. That has been present in hearings in the parliament that we have organized. They have had 150 demonstrations outside of parliament, and they have influenced the public debate a lot. And one of the good things with them is they don't just organize one nationality. They organize everyone who is without papers. And most of the people who has been active in this organization, a few hundred, has nowadays their permanent residency. Because of the struggle, of course, because it's not so comfortable for the state to have people who are paperless and organized, because they would go to the media, they would talk to the newspapers, they would be on the radio, they would be on the television. I am a person who they want to throw out of the country. This is my case. This is what I've been through. and I cannot go back to my country. Here's my friend, he or she is from another country, but we have the same kind of experience with the Swedish authorities, for example. So nowadays that organization is a little bit less active, but it's still there. And we also managed, or they managed, to influence the unions. That is one of the basic strategies that one must have to get into the labor movement. Both the parties, of course, but also the unions. Because before, if you look just back 5, 6, 7, or 10 years from now, if you look back 10 years, unions would not be that good at all when it comes to dealing with people without papers. They would see them as illegal, they would sometimes see them as people coming to take my job for a lower salary, so they would not like paperless people on the workplaces. That has basically shifted totally. Because unions are now, lots of unions, at least 4 or 5 of the main unions are now organizing people without papers. They are allowed to be members of the unions. Not just, please, we can help you, you poor little paperless man, but on the other hand, you're a full-worthy member of the union. And they have started to see that we are not here to uphold the migration policies of the state. We are here to look at the workplace and who is working and who is not working. And that's, we organize everyone who is working. I will show you, if I can, the website where you can see more information on this too. Because there is now a trade union center for people without papers. Here, Swedish Trade Union Center for Undocumented Migrant Workers, it's called. And I will go down to the English text. What you can see here is that they accept, they have an office which is open at least once a week, and they have this website, and they have telephone service for undocumented or people without papers. And they are trying to help people to get their rights in the workplace. Some of them are also, at least those working in restaurant business, in service sectors, and some others, are also, as I said, allowing people without papers to be members of the union. This is a huge step forward. Huge step forward. And I think that it will also be politically interesting in the coming days. Because once you have accepted that people without paper are just like you and me, just like anyone else who's working in this workplace, we should be treated equally. When the unions have realized that, that can also influence the main, the Social Democratic Party, which is the main party in the labor movement. And they are needed in order to shift the policies when we once get a majority for another government in Sweden, which we will in the next elections, quite frankly. So that is another example of a very positive development that has been put in place in Sweden. I'll try to get that out and get back to my notes, because I will give you one last example of what has been attained in Sweden. It is sometimes said that Sweden had an amnesty for refugees. I don't know if you've heard this. Amnesty would mean that anyone who is here, so-called illegally, or whose permit who has been turned down when they try to seek asylum, they wouldn't be allowed to stay. That has been done in several European Union countries, like Spain, for example. They had an amnesty for 500,000 people. That's okay, you're here already, now you're allowed to stay legally. Quite simple to do. But in Sweden that was not, it was not that simple, or that easy. We had in the last half of 2004, a movement was created that was then, after a while, called Refugee Amnesty 2005, Flyktningamnesti 2005. And that meant that they would fight for anyone who is in the country, illegally, so as they call it, or undocumented, should be, in a one-time decision, allowed to stay. Doesn't matter where you come from. If you have committed serious crimes against humanity and these kind of things, maybe you could be excluded from this. But 999 out of 1,000 should be allowed to stay. That was the political goal of this. And that actually created a big movement. The churches went in, social movements went in, political parties. At one time we had 5 political parties, parliament parties, who stood behind the demand for an amnesty for all refugees or all undocumented people. And it was a lot of manifestations, demonstrations, public hearings, seminars, meetings, articles in the newspapers. It was on the television every day for 2 weeks. And 160,000 names, signatures, were gathered in a big campaign to show that there was a public support for this demand. We didn't attain it completely, but we meaning the Left Party and the Green Party, together with the social movements of the churches, the refugee movement, tried to force the Social Democratic governing party at that time to allow for a second try to get a permit to stay. So 30,000 people who had been turned down, who had not got their permits, they were allowed to seek again. And 18,000 people were allowed to stay. So it's not a complete amnesty. Not everyone was allowed. But 18,000 people were still allowed to stay. The state had said before, you must leave this country and go back to your own country. And we shifted that, creating a possibility for 18,000 people to be allowed to build a future in Sweden from that day on. Some of them had been there for 5, 6, 8, the longest was 15 years, undocumented. And we know what undocumented means. I mean, it's on this poster here, you know what it is. Most of you know it better than I do, what it is like to live in a country and have no rights. No rights in the labor market, no human rights at all, no security. The only thing you have is the fear. The fear that today or maybe tomorrow someone will come and get me and send me back to a country which I cannot go back to. And we created together we created a future for these at least 18,000 people. And that was, for me, one of the proudest moments ever, actually. And so many people celebrated, and so many people. I've never been invited to so many parties as I was after that decision was taking place, and that's something to be proud of. But it was, and that is what I'm trying to conclude here. That was made possible not by political parties only, not by social movements only, not by paperless people only, but by all of us together. And that is the kind of connections that you need to find and not need to build. You need to use all available tools in the toolbox to try and raise opinion, to try and come together, and to also convince people with different party political background that this is not about party politics as we know them from before. This is about human rights, and this is about the right to build a future in a country where you can feel safe, where you have the possibility for yourself and for your loved ones to create a future for yourselves. So it is possible. That's what I want to conclude. Even though we do not have a refugee policy today that is paradise or fantastic, it is better than what we see in Norway. You can see that quite easily. And it is possible to win. It is possible to win if you try, if you struggle, if you build the cooperations that is needed to do that. We have shown a few times that we can win over the authorities. You need to combine different methods. You need to raise public opinion, and you need to be very, very clever when you take contacts with the political parties. Try to convince them in their own language, so to speak. So try to be inside Parliament, if you can, inside government too. This was during my time as a parliamentarian, and I worked together with people who I had absolutely nothing in common with, besides this. Nothing. We would fight on every other issue. I would call them conservative Christian Democrats that would like work for what they call family things that I would myself feel very far from. I could work with new liberals within Parliament. We wouldn't talk about anything else than this, and to come together on this specific issue where we lay everything else aside and just work together on this issue. Tried to come together on what we felt then was the most important or possible to do. And by winning, you also challenge the whole system. That's important to know. It's not just once that you stop a deportation. Because if you stop a deportation and that person is then granted asylum in the country, you have shown that the system doesn't work, right? And if you can, from time to time, influence public opinion in order to raise 160,000 signatures, you have shown that it's not like everyone is saying that people are xenophobic or racist or doesn't want immigrants here. It's the other way around. And you, as politicians and decision makers in government and parliament, you need to start listening to people. They want people to come here if they are otherwise being persecuted or being in a war zone or being even tortured. So, by example, you also challenge the whole system. So, concluding, once and last time, we can do this. It has been done. It takes a very long time of systematic work. But when you at least succeed in getting one person a permanent residentship or asylum in a country, it's worth it. Then you can work for 10 more years for the next one, or the next 10 ones. Thank you for listening for a while. We will now have, if anyone has the strength for it, questions and comments on both my words and also Evis from before. She will join us shortly. Thanks.